Hello everybody, this is part 3 on a series on how to make drum beats with Ableton Live 9. My name's Tom Cosm. In the first part we talked about just using audio tracks and using samples, dragging samples in. The second part we talked about using multiple MIDI tracks with samplers triggering different drum beats. This time I'm going to be using just a single MIDI track, so just one track for the entire drum loop. That's the snares, the kicks, the hi-hats, everything. So I can go ahead and delete these three here. I just held down Shift key to delete all to select all three of them by clicking. Hit delete and we have our MIDI 1 track. Now the best way to do this is to go into your instruments area. These are the native Ableton Live instruments and we're going to be using a thing called a drum rack. So I'm going to double click this, or you can drag and drop it if you want down into the bottom area. So a drum rack looks like this. It gives you 16 individual pads presented to you initially, but you can go up and down pages. So you see if I click on the square and drag it up and down, it moves, and these correspond to notes on a keyboard. It doesn't actually show you a keyboard as such, but it gives you the note values because you will be you can actually use a MIDI controller to play keys on a keyboard to trigger these individual pads. It doesn't really matter where you have the square to start off with. By default it has it on C1, so we're just going to roll with that. Now each one of these individual pads on the drum rack, you can load a sampler onto it. You can actually put various instruments or samplers or even VSTs onto one of these pads, but we're going to be working with just samplers today, and by dragging the sample onto one of these pads it will automatically create an instrument within that pad, a sampler in that pad with the sample in it. It's kind of how racks work in a way, so you could think of these as multiple chains. So each one of these you can have a whole series of instruments, samplers, and effects, and MIDI effects as well if you choose to do so. So I'm going to go down here and choose some samples. So remember I have this pack which I've been using throughout this series, which is the Xmas Special Drum Kit. It's a pretty basic but pretty chunky drum kit I put together for the pro members of my website. So I'm just going to be using these samples. They're all original stuff I've created. So let's go through and find a kick. I think I'm going to go with a dubby tune here. Let's just go with this one. So I'm going to drag kick 8 down into C1. You'll see it's loaded up a simpler. I think I said sampler before, sorry. This is a simpler, which is the simple version of the sampler. And so it's loaded up a simpler for us. We can right click and choose simpler to sampler if we actually want to work with the sampler, which is the much more comprehensive sampler. But we're going to go back to simpler. So you can right click and switch between the two if you want to do so. It puts kick 8 there, and we can play it by doing this. If we want to solo just this pad, we can click solo here, or we can mute the entire pad altogether. Excellent. So now in my drum rack channel, you'll notice it's automatically named itself to drum rack because I have a drum rack in it. I'm going to add a MIDI clip into this clip slot, and we're working in session view here. I believe the previous videos we did work a bit in arrangement view, so I hit the tab key then, or you can change it here. We're working in session view for this one, just because we've got one track and just to change it up a bit. So in session view, each one of these slots is where you can put a MIDI clip, which sends information to the drum rack when it's being triggered to play. So I can double click here, it automatically creates a MIDI clip for us, little coloured box with the play symbol. And if we look down here, I'm just going to bring up my launch section, which is the L. So the launch section, and I'll bring up the envelope section as well, just so we've got everything here. In the note section, you'll see the length of the clip is 1 bar long. I'm actually going to extend this out. Let's change this to 4 bars long. I just push the up arrow to go up in increments there, and you'll notice that because I've only got one sample here in the drum rack, in the MIDI clip, it's only given me one option here. So there's no piano roll here anymore. It knows that this is a sampler and there's only one sample loaded, so this is the only place I can put notes. So I'm going to add a kick in like that, and let's drag it out so it's exactly 1 beat long. So here's our 4 beats of the bar, and I'm going to click on this and do Command D to duplicate it, and we'll do that 16 times. So it's going to kind of fall to the floor at the moment. Alright, I'm going to slow it down a bit. So this is the master BPM up here, the tempo. Alright, let's leave it there. That's pretty good. It's going to be a dubby kind of tune, but it's going to have a constant kick going through it, I think. Now let's get back to a drum rack. I'm just going to double click on the title of the MIDI clip up here, and let's load in a snare. So where's our snares? These are all quite snappy snares. I'm going to use this one here, snare 3, and I'm going to drag this down into E1. I could drag it into C1, I could drag it anywhere in this drum rack. I'm just going to put it here because it seems to be a bit of a formula that kicks kind of go here, snares go here, hi-hats go here, and kind of percussion instruments go here. It's not a rule, but it's just what I've kind of noticed and what I learned to do, so I tend to do that. Just means if I want to add some more snares, I can put them here and keep things nice and ordered. So we've got a kick, we've got a snare, and we can open this up and you'll see now we have a snare 3. So I'm going to put the snare on the 3rd beat of each bar. Great, now let's jump ahead and choose some hi-hats. Go into my hi-hats folder. It's not a closed hat, it's a crash, I don't know why that's still in there. Let's just pick this closed hat 1, closed hat 3, and open hats. Let's just do something a bit different. That one's a bit strange. And put the 5 there. So now we can open up our MIDI clip again, and we've got the 1, the 3, and the 5 as we just added them. So very simply I'm just going to put a very standard kind of computer sounding beat. Okay, there's nothing fantastic about this right now, it's just a very simple kind of drum sequencer pattern that you might hear. What we can do is we can change the velocity of any of these hits that we like. So the velocity, of course, is this line below the note. So when we select a note, it'll turn a dark red, and we can move this up and down. And you'll notice the velocity goes from 0 to 127. We can bring this up a bit bigger. And the velocity is usually assigned to the volume of the sample. So it is in this case. You can assign the velocity to other things, the pan or the cutoff filter, or probably even the pitch, but for now it's assigned to the volume. So that's good. So that means we can go through and we can select a bunch of notes here. I'm holding down Shift key while I click to select a bunch of different notes. I'm just going to select every second note. And once we have all those selected, we can move the velocity of all of them at once. Another way is to hold down the Command key over the note and then drag up and down. So this is just going to make the second hit a bit quieter than the first. It starts to make it a bit human. Not bad. Now what we can do is start adding kind of little double notes in here. So that would really give it a bit more of a human sound. So maybe, maybe if we zoom in here, if we make this one shorter. Let's go back to the start here. Cool, and we'll make these ones here shorter. If I select both of them, they'll both resize, and then I can hold down the Option key and drag, it'll duplicate them across. So that just gives us 4. And these ones I'm going to select them all by dragging, and I'm going to hold down the Command key and drag a line with the velocity here. So I'm going to drag a line which will change the velocity for those notes in the shape of the line that I chose. And if we click on the play symbol here, it should start at the second beat. I'll make this one a bit louder. And I'm just going to quickly go through and double up a few more of these. And let's just for fun make these two doubled again. So I'm going to hit Command 1 to make the grid size smaller, select those notes, drag them back, hold down Option and duplicate them. And of course we should do the little line thing again. It just sounds good. It's like a little kind of roll where they're getting a bit more intense as the notes progress. You can make this line start even lower, or we can drag down this way. Why not? Okay, now that we've got these notes here, what we can do is we can start going through and clicking on just some random ones here and there. It doesn't really matter where at this stage, and just moving them up one to this close hat 3. Let's see how this sounds. So let's choose this note. I'm going to hit the up arrow, and it's going to play a different. Now it's going to play a different hi-hat on that particular note. And maybe put this one up to the open hat. So it's just a matter of kind of trial and error here. Kind of like how that works. Awesome. I think I have some crash cymbals here. That's good. They're all pretty intense. These kind of samples were made more for kind of glitch hop and breaks and stuff, which are a bit more full force. But we can work with these for sure for a bit more of a chilled dub track. So I'll take that crash 2. Let's drag it down into C2 here. So it's pretty loud, so that's okay. We can go in here and we can add a crash at the start of the bar, but we can bring the velocity right down. And by holding down the command key and dragging down, we can go into the sample by double clicking it, and it will bring up the crash for us here. We can edit each one of these samples individually. Say if I wanted this closed hi-hat, I wanted it to be higher transpose. Here's the transpose value. We can move this up, but we don't want that for now. Let's change the transposition of the crash. Transposition, of course, meaning the pitch. We can also change the volume here if it's too loud. This is where the velocity is actually attached to the volume. So you see here the velocity, which was that line that was underneath the note, is changing the volume by 45%. So I can move this volume and the velocity will still change the volume by 45%, but I'm just altering what the maximum value would actually be. Let's go into our percussion. We've got bongos 1, 2, 3, 4. So let's move up one notch on the page system here, and we've got E2, F2, F sharp, and G. Let's drag those bongos down in there. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now we go in here. We will have our bongos all lined up for us. That's pretty good. What I'm going to do is push Command 2 here and make the grid size bigger and bigger and bigger until we've just got one bar, because I'm going to repeat that bongo pattern over and over. I'm going to add a few more little fills in there, but I want to repeat that 1, 2, 3, 4 times. Now I'm going to push Command 1, 1, 1 to get it smaller again. And now we can just add another little bongo hits here and there. And we can put a little roll in here like we did before with the hi-hats. Let's make it really fast. Don't know if this will sound good. If we delete this one and this one. And what else we got? We've got some tom drums. Let's just use these two. This is the last samples I'm going to use for this drum loop. So I'm going to drag the toms in there. And where are we? Tom 14 and 15. Very simple. Let's listen to this. Maybe put it here. bringing the velocity up of those two toms. That'll do. Now, I've made it sound kind of human with a bit of variation. We've changed the velocity of various notes. But there's one other thing we can do here which really gives it groove. And this is, of course, giving it groove from the groove pool. So the groove pool is an area in Ableton Live where you can store specific grooves. And grooves are sets of information that tell a particular clip how to play with a bit of expression. And by expression I mean swaying notes a little bit out of time, putting them a little bit late, give it a bit of swing, give it a bit of funk, and that sort of thing. And there's various grooves that you have available to you with Ableton Live by default. You can also extract grooves from almost anything, any audio clip or MIDI clip that you have. I'm just going to right click and go browse groove library. It brings me to my packs. Here's my swings and grooves, and inside these folders I can choose various grooves. Let's go for Latin percussion, maybe? No, let's not do that. We'll just stick with the standard swing. Usually I go with 16th grooves, so these will swing every 16th note, but I believe for this I need to go with 8th note swings. And 05, 15, 25 up to 99, these are the extremities, or how extreme each one of these swings are. So let's stick with, say, a 75. I'm going to drag the 75 into my groove pool. Just to show you what this looks like, I'm going to create a new MIDI track. You can actually drag grooves into MIDI tracks because they are pretty much just MIDI clips. And by doing so, where are we here? Is it going to show us the notes? There's the notes there. So you'll see how this swing, it's instead of that note being there, the note is actually here. And it's done that for every second note, every second 8th note. And what we do is when this MIDI clip is actually in the groove pool, it's called a groove, and by dragging that onto a MIDI clip, it will apply that groove to all of these notes here. Now it doesn't actually visually show you the shift of the notes, but it does actually do it. Let's have a listen. So these bongos don't sound very good with that groove, but can you hear how it kind of really shifts it? That's out of place. Let's just delete it for now. These sound a bit out of place with the groove as well. It's almost triplet, giving everything triplets. And we can change the timing here if we don't want it to apply so much. If I have this at 0, it plays it flat like it was before. And as I move the timing up, you'll be able to hear the groove coming in. That'll do for now. Actually, no, I'm going to get rid of these. They're annoying me. I'm going to add a new MIDI track here. I know this is going off course a bit, but that's like what we like to do here. I'm going to add an operator, which is just on a single oscillator with a sine wave, just to add some bass, because I feel like this really needs some kind of sub to give it some oomph. So I'm just going to play that. Let's turn the preview on here, draw on a note, octave down, octave down. Remember, we need to apply the groove to this as well, otherwise this will be playing straight and this will be playing with the groove, and they'll clash. Let's change the length of this up a bit. Awesome. I'm just going to go into the operator and we're going to turn a pitch envelope on, so this line will apply to the pitch of every individual note. Bring up the amount to 100%, bring up the peak, and bring down the decay. This will give it a quick pitch bend from a higher note at the start of each note, which gives a bit of a punch. What we can also do is go in here, select all. I'm going to drag these notes quite short, actually short as possible, drag them out a little bit longer. And now we can go into the amplitude envelope of our oscillator and we can bring the release out. So this will kind of make it sound more like a bass. Turn the voices to 1. Now this is because when it's on one voice it can only play one sound at a time. If it's on 6, the tail of one bass note will overflow into the start of a new bass note. So we put it on one voice and that means it'll instantly stop when it gets a new note. And one other thing I like to do here, I know I'm going into synthesis here, but because this is a frequency modulated synthesizer, this oscillator frequency modulates this oscillator. If you want to give a sub bass some real grunt, and it's really good if it's quite a low note, you can make it a bit more distinguishable by having the modulator oscillator be at half of the original carrier oscillator and bring the level up just a little bit, and it will kind of give it a bit of a weird wobble. If you do it extreme you'll be able to hear what I'm talking about, but just a little bit gives it some grunt. We also need to give this one some release as well. And if we really wanted to give it a bit of a punch at the start, we could use the other modulating frequency, bring that up, and make sure that this has a very, very, very short decay to a negative infinity sustain. And while we're at it, one more MIDI track. Sounds, let's choose pianos and keys. Let's add in just this preset here, which is Clav 3 clean. Open it up and put in some skanky chords. And then I'll go back to the drums, I promise. Put them in the wrong place. And we'll give that an auto filter. And some reverb. Okay, so back to the drums here. I'll show you one more trick. So, as I said, the main convenience of having one MIDI clip with all your drum information is you can apply grooves to it, and you can go in and edit all of the notes in one easy to see MIDI editor, and you've got everything at your disposal right here. You can edit any of these quite easily. We can make the kick lower. But by using a drum rack, if I go into the snare, you'll see we've got a snare simpler here, but we can also add effects after it. For example, I can drag a reverb after the whole drum rack, which will apply a reverb to the whole drums. Or I can drag the reverb after just the simpler that's containing that snare sample. So now just the snare will be reverberated. And of course what we can do here is we can start using racks after this, or we can use a rack here. We can have a multi-layered sample within this simpler, or we could have a multi-layered audio effects rack. So I'm going to do that by right-clicking and going Group. So now we have an audio effect rack with one chain, which we'll call Reverb. I'm going to add another chain which is called Clean. And the clean has absolutely no effects on it there. The reverb has the reverb, so that means I can give the reverb maximum wetness because the clean is already taking over the dry part of this. I don't need any dry, I just need maximum wetness. Wetness meaning only the reverberated part of the sound, none of the original signal, only the reverberated part, because the clean's handling it. So let's have a listen. Bit too much decay time. So now I could do something like I could put a flanger after that reverb, and this should just give that, just the reverberated part, a constant kind of flanged sound. Flanged. Now we could duplicate this reverb and we'll call this phase. I'm going to mute the original reverb for now. I'm going to get rid of the flanger after that, and let's put a phaser instead. Give the phaser some LFO amount. Let's give it all the LFO amount. And of course I deleted the flanger off the wrong channel, so let's just rename these. This one is actually the flange. This one is actually the phase. My apologies. It's quite interesting. Let's add one more chain here, and we'll call this chain delay 1. And let's put in a simple delay here. I'm going to mute the phase one, so now we're just listening to the delay. This is a simple delay. We've got a left and a right delay. I'm going to link them together, which means this one just controls both left and right. And let's put it on 3, which means 3 16th notes. That's the time between each delay. And we'll turn the feedback up, which is how many delays there actually are. And let's put a reverb after the simple delay. And we'll put an auto filter. So this will automatically filter that delay signal, put it on a bandpass like this, and then give that some LFO. So it's going to sweep it up and down like this. Awesome, and let's create one more chain here. I'm sure you're getting the idea by now. You can have 128 of these chains if you want. Delay 2, drag it up there, mute that, bring up delay 2, oops, and delay 2, we'll use a simple delay again, just keep things simple, link, and we'll turn the sync off on this one, so that doesn't, now it's not a matter of how many 16th notes do we want the length between the separate delays to be. We'll turn it into time mode, which gives us the length in milliseconds. Give that a lot of feedback. It's quite cool. I like that moving around. So what I'm going to do is go into a Max for Live devices, go Max Audio Effect, and choose the LFO. I'm going to drag that in there. Max for Live, of course, meaning really, really custom-made devices, which are still, I believe, made by Ableton, the company, but they're not native instruments, so to speak. So now we have this LFO constantly moving up and down. Let's bring the rate down so it's nice and slow. And we can map that to that time which I was enjoying, and you'll see now the time is going to be moving around. But we want the depth, we want to bring the offset down because I don't want the maximum value to go too high. Bring the depth down. Let's just get it going a bit faster so we can see what's happening. So I want the depth down, I want it about there, and I want it nice and slow. Give it more feedback. If we right click on the simple delay, we can choose repitch mode, which should be interesting. What this does is it tries to compensate for the distance between the delays by repitching things up if it's getting shorter and lower if it's getting longer. It's pretty cool. Now the final stage of this is I want each snare to play a different one of these. 1, 2, 3, 4. We've got 4 snares. 1, 2, 3, 4. So how do we go about this? Well, we start using the chain area of the audio effect rack. Remembering the chain area says when this orange slider is over a particular row, if this particular I guess chain has some substance over that row, for example this now has substance over that row, excuse my terminology but hopefully you understand what I'm talking about. If this falls over a part where it's got a color or it's colored in, it will play audio through that one. If it's not, it won't play anything. So you notice if I play it now, we don't hear any snare because this is saying play the snare through any one of these 5 that corresponds to this. Well, there isn't anything there yet. So if we go back here and drag this down, what we can do is we can, because we've got 4 of these, 1, 2, 3, 4, all we have to use are 4 increments, so that would be 1, 2, 3, 4. We need to have the clean stretched out to cover all of those 4, so 2, 3. Remembering 0 is actually considered an element, so it's 0, 1, 2, 3, not actually 1, 2, 3, 4, it's 0, 1, 2, 3. So this needs to be dragged out from 0, 1, 2, 3. Then this one, which is the phaser, will have playing on the 0. Then I want the delay 1 to play on the 2, so I'm going to click that and drag it, so just there on the 2. Then I want the phaser, the flanger, sorry, to play on the 2. So that was the 1, 0, 1, 2, and then this one we want to play on the 3. So now we can mess with this slider here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and it will play a different one. We need to make sure these are unmuted. Now we can automate this. This is an actual automatable or modulatable whatever the fuck ever parameter. So we can go into our MIDI clip here, go into our envelopes mode. It's picked up that the last thing we tried to mess with was in fact the chain selector of the audio effect rack, and by default it's set to 0. So here's our first snare, so that's all good. We can keep the line on 0 for that first snare. If we go into our pencil tool, open up the grid massively, and now we can change this for each individual thing. So that goes to 1, that goes to 2, and that goes to 3. So that'll play the phaser, that'll play the delay 1, that'll play the flanger, that'll play the delay 2. So let's have a look at that. Don't like this one very much, this flanger. Why is that done that? We've got a reverb with phaser. Reverb with a flanger. Aha! I've put the auto filter and this LFO over everything within this individual simpler. So it goes this, then the LFO and the auto filter. I don't actually want that. That's an accident. You got to watch where you put these things in these little gaps in these when you start really racking these things up and changing things up. So I believe it was the delay 2 that we want that. So I need to select these and bring them back a notch like that. So they were outside of the entire audio rack. So every single track on the audio rack was being affected by these two things here. But I didn't want that. I just wanted them on this delay. So yeah, be careful. Don't do what I did. And you'll be sweet, bro. Alright, let's have a listen. Alright, that's it. I hope you enjoyed that. That's the end of the series. My name is Tom Cosm. You can check out my website, www.cosm.co.nz. We've got a really, really good active community there now. Lots of Ableton Live users, forums, posting, and having lots of fun and chatting and collaborating and asking and answering questions. Goodbye.